The sun was just a pale smudge behind the clouds as Jonah Corbin made his way to the edge of his property. He was checking the fence line after last night's storm, muttering to himself about the chores waiting back at the farmhouse. The muddy ground pulled at his boots, and a chill wind carried the smell of rain-soaked earth. It was a morning like any other, until he spotted something lying at the base of a gnarled oak tree. At first, Jonah thought it was just a large animal, a deer, maybe, or some unlucky predator that had gotten caught out in the storm. But as he got closer, he froze. The thing before him wasn't any kind of wildlife he'd ever seen. It was massive, at least twice the size of a man, with a body covered in thick, segmented plates that shimmered faintly in the grey light. What he'd taken for fur or feathers, at a distance, turned out to be something more alien. Sharp-edged protrusions and chitinous ridges, the deep grooves between them oozing a faintly glowing greenish fluid. The creature's 6 limbs, 2 bulky forearms and 4 thinner jointed legs, were sprawled out at awkward angles. Jonah's heart pounded. He could turn around, go back to the farmhouse, call the sheriff, or better yet the military. But he didn't move. The creature made a faint, rattling sound, and its glossy black eyes, large as saucers, flickered open for a moment. It wasn't dead, and from the look of it, it was barely alive. Cautiously, Jonah circled closer. The creature's wounds were obvious now, deep gashes in its armored hide, as if it had been through some kind of battle. Its breathing was shallow, its body trembling despite its formidable size and appearance. Jonah knelt a few feet away, trying to calm his racing mind. If it was dangerous, it didn't look like it could do much harm in this state. But if it died here, what would happen? Would others like it come looking? Would it be better to try and help it? Maybe buy himself some goodwill with whatever had left it here. Hell, Jonah muttered under his breath. What am I doing? Grunting with effort, he worked his hands under one of its forelimbs. The creature stirred weakly, emitting a low, warbling noise that made Jonah's skin crawl, but it didn't lash out. Slowly, Jonah dragged it a few feet toward the barn. Each step was a struggle. The thing was heavy as a tractor, and its alien features made it impossible to get a good grip. Sweat soaked his shirt and his muscles burned, but he finally managed to haul it inside the barn and onto a pile of old hay bales. Once it was out of the rain, Jonah took a step back, panting. The barn's dim light made the creature's injuries look worse. He didn't know where to start. How could he treat something so far removed from anything he'd ever encountered? He fetched a clean towel and some water, though, and carefully began to dab at the glowing fluid around the wounds. The creature didn't fight him. Its eyes watched him, unblinking, but there was no aggression, only a faint, exhausted resignation. I don't know if this'll help you, Jonah muttered as he worked. But I can't just leave you to die out here. The creature made another soft sound, something between a chirp and a groan, and then fell silent. Jonah spent the better part of the afternoon tending to it, cleaning its wounds as best he could, and draping an old canvas sheet over its shivering form. When it seemed stable enough, he left it alone and returned to the farmhouse. But even as he sat down to his cold dinner, the image of the creature stayed with him. Its strange, alien body, its labored breaths, and those dark, gleaming eyes. Something had left it there. Something had done this to it. And deep down, Jonah knew that whatever or whoever was responsible, they might not be far away. When the rooster crowed at dawn, Jonah woke up with a dull ache in his back and an uneasy feeling in his gut. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbed his eyes, and tried to shake the memory of yesterday's bizarre encounter. It had to be a dream, he thought, a weird, vivid dream brought on by too much work and not enough sleep. But when he glanced out the window, the barn stood silent and ordinary in the morning mist. That was a good sign, wasn't it? He dressed quickly, his mind drifting, to the chores waiting for him. After the storm, the fields would need clearing. The old tractor had been on its last legs for months, and now it refused to start. At least the routine would keep his hands busy and his mind from wandering. Jonah's first stop was the barn. He pushed the door open, heart pounding, half expecting to find the alien creature still sprawled there. But the space was empty, save for a few scattered bales of hay and the faintest hint of a metallic, almost sweet scent. Jonah stepped inside, scanning the shadows. There was no sign of the creature, no tracks, no blood trail. It was as if it had evaporated. That would have been strange enough, but something else caught his eye. Just inside the barn door, near the spot where the alien had lain, a small object gleamed in the light, streaming through the cracks in the wood. Jonah crouched and picked it up. It fit in the palm of his hand, a smooth metallic trinket shaped like a crescent, engraved with delicate, swirling symbols. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly, as if it held some kind of energy. Jonah turned it over, squinting at the alien markings. He had no idea what it was, but it didn't seem like junk. If the creature had left it behind, was it a message? A gift? A warning? He slid it into his pocket, unsure of what to do. Maybe he could bring it to someone in town, someone who might know about strange metals or odd artifacts. Then again, if it was alien, would he even want anyone else to know? He had it. Jonah stood there for a long moment, his mind a whirlwind of questions. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting something or someone to come through the door. But the barn was silent, the fields beyond still and grey in the early light. The day dragged on, but Jonah couldn't focus. The usual rhythm of his chores was broken by a growing sense of unease. As he worked, he noticed odd things around the property. Fence posts that had been sturdy yesterday now leaned at strange angles. A patch of soil near the far field was scorched black, though Jonah hadn't burned anything there. In the woods, he found branches snapped clean through, like something heavy had passed through during the night. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled. Something had been out here, and it wasn't just a lost animal or a random storm. Then there was the sound. It started mid-afternoon, a faint, steady hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jonah first noticed it while hauling a broken fence panel. He stopped, set the panel down, and listened. It wasn't a vehicle or a plane, and it didn't match the rhythm of any machine he owned. It was almost musical, a deep vibration that hung in the air like a low note on a massive organ. No matter where he went, the sound followed, growing louder, more insistent. By the time the sun began to set, Jonah felt like he was being watched. He found himself glancing at the sky, scanning the horizon, his gut twisting with a sense of impending doom. The barn trinket was still in his pocket, radiating a faint warmth. Jonah couldn't decide whether to keep it close or toss it into the nearest pond. Was it calling something to him, or was it warning him to run? As the last light of the day faded, Jonah spotted movement overhead. He shielded his eyes, squinting at the darkening sky. At first, it looked like a cluster of clouds, but then he saw the smooth, sharp edges, angular shapes that reflected the dim glow of the horizon. The hum grew louder, vibrating in his chest. Jonah stood frozen as the shapes descended. They weren't clouds. They weren't planes. They were ships, sleek alien vessels that gleamed like polished obsidian, their undersides glowing faintly. The hum deepened into a rumble that shook the ground beneath Jonah's boots. He staggered back, his eyes wide, as the ships hovered above his fields. One of them broke formation and came lower, its surface rippling with light. With a hiss of displaced air, it landed in the pasture, flattening the grass in a wide circle. The ship's hull split open, and a ramp extended to the ground. Jonah didn't move. He didn't run. He could only stand there staring as figures emerged, tall, armored beings whose glowing visors reflected the pale moonlight. They stepped forward, each motion precise, their angular forms unlike anything Jonah had ever seen. They moved with purpose, their heads turning as if scanning the area. One of the beings paused, its gaze locking onto Jonah. It raised an arm, and the barn trinket in his pocket grew warm enough to burn. Jonah flinched, but the being only tilted its head, as though curious. Then it spoke. Not in words, Jonah could understand, but in a series of clicks and hums that made his stomach tighten. A device on the being's forearm blinked, and a smooth, artificial voice spoke in heavily accented English. "Farmer, you have what we seek. Tasks." The first being stepped closer, and Jonah fought the instinct to bolt. Its form was both humanoid and alien, encased in a glinting, segmented exoskeleton that seemed alive, shifting subtly as it moved. The pale moonlight caught the jagged edges of its armor, and its glowing visor gave no hint of what might be underneath. Though the creature stood upright on two legs, everything else about it, its elongated limbs, the faint hum emanating from its joints, set Jonah's nerves on edge. The device on its arm pulsed as it repeated the message, this time with a slightly smoother tone. "Farmer, you hold the token of our scout. We mean no harm." Jonah's mouth was dry, but he managed to stammer, I found it. After I helped that thing. Your scout, I guess." He instinctively reached into his pocket and pulled out the crescent-shaped trinket. It still glowed faintly, its surface warm and pulsing in his palm. The alien clicked softly, a sound Jonah could only interpret as acknowledgement. Another figure stepped forward, slightly smaller but just as intimidating, and began scanning the trinket with a strange, rod-like instrument. Its movements were efficient, clinical, and it didn't seem to notice or care that Jonah was staring at it like a deer caught in the headlights. "You aided our soldier," the first alien said through the translator. Its tone shifted, almost reverent. "Your actions preserved vital information." "Information?" Jonah's voice cracked. "I didn't know. Look, I just didn't want to leave it there to die. I wasn't trying to get involved in any of this." The alien tilted its head, as though it was puzzled by Jonah's words. "Your motives do not diminish the value of your actions. The scout's recovery allowed us to intercept critical data about the enemy." "Enemy?" Jonah's stomach churned. "What enemy? You mean, you're at war? Is that why you're here?" The first alien didn't answer immediately. Instead, it raised one of its segmented arms and made a sweeping motion. More figures emerged from the ship, carrying sleek equipment that glowed faintly. They moved in practiced unison, setting up devices around the barn and fields. One of them approached a patch of scorched earth and began examining it with what looked like a glass pane, shimmering with complex symbols. Jonah took a step back. "Wait, what are you doing? You can't just start digging up my land." The lead alien turned toward him. "This location is now of strategic importance. The information retrieved by our scout confirms this site's value as a defensive position." Jonah's pulse quickened. "Defensive position? No, hold on. This is my farm. I didn't sign up to host a base, or whatever you're calling it." The alien raised a hand, silencing him. "Farmer, we acknowledge your claim to this territory. We will not interfere with your livelihood. In fact, we will enhance it." "Enhance it?" Jonah was too confused to be angry. "What are you talking about?" A different alien stepped forward, this one bearing a crystalline device that looked like it had been pulled from the core of a star. It placed the device on the ground, and a soft, radiant light spread out, washing over the field. Jonah's jaw dropped as the scorched earth smoothed itself over, the soil taking on a richer, darker hue. Weeds seemed to wither and vanish, and even the broken fence posts appeared to straighten, as if repaired by some invisible hand. What in the... Jonah trailed off, too stunned to finish his thought. "We understand your concerns," the lead alien said. "In return for allowing us to establish a defensive perimeter, we will ensure the prosperity of your farm. Your crops will flourish. Your land will remain secure." Jonah ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the impossible. The aliens' technology was working miracles before his eyes, but the larger picture, why they had come, who their enemy was, still hung over him like a storm cloud. "I don't even know who you people are," he said finally, "or what's really going on. If I agree to this deal, what happens when your enemy shows up? What happens to me?" The alien's visor glowed faintly as it considered his question. "Our presence here will deter our enemy, but should they come, you will be under our protection." Jonah didn't feel particularly reassured. "And if they don't care about that? If they attack anyway?" There was a pause. Then the alien said, "Then we will fight." Jonah rubbed his face with both hands. He felt like he was losing his grip on reality. These beings weren't just passing through, they were making plans, building defenses, and involving him in a conflict that was far bigger than anything he could comprehend. But at the same time, they'd repaired part of his land in an instant. If they could actually follow through on their promises, maybe it wouldn't be all bad. Still, he had no idea who he could trust, and every time he looked at the trinket in his hand, he felt like he was holding something far more dangerous than he could understand. Over the next several days, Jonah's farm became a hive of activity. The aliens moved with startling efficiency, setting up what they referred to as a forward operations array. Jonah's fields, once quiet and familiar, were now dotted with strange equipment. Sleek towers that hummed softly in the evening air, glowing pylons that pulsed in rhythmic patterns, and mobile drones that hovered silently over the pastures. True to their word, the aliens ensured Jonah's farm thrived. Amidst their preparations, his crops, which had struggled in the rocky soil, now grew in verdant abundance. The old irrigation system, once a source of constant frustration, was replaced by a glimmering network of conduits that never leaked or clogged. Jonah even found his battered tractor replaced by a gleaming automated machine that purred quietly and responded to commands in his own voice. But as grateful as Jonah was for the improvements, he couldn't ignore the growing tension in the air. Every alien device, every new piece of equipment installed, was a reminder that something was coming. He could feel it, like a distant storm creeping closer, even when the skies were clear. Jonah spent his evenings on the porch, staring out at the transformed landscape. Where his barn once stood alone, now a half-dozen alien structures glimmered with a soft, unearthly light. The fields looked healthier than they ever had, but they also looked foreign, as if the land no longer belonged entirely to him. "You're a long way from Kansas, Jonah," he muttered to himself, taking a sip of his coffee. The trinket, the one he'd found after helping the scout, rested on the porch railing. He'd kept it close these past days, though he wasn't entirely sure why. It still pulsed faintly when he touched it, and sometimes he thought he could hear a faint hum, like it was calling to him. On the fifth evening since the ships arrived, the alien leader, whom Jonah had nicknamed Crest, due to the angular ridge on its helmet, approached the porch. Jonah had gotten used to Crest's silent movements, but it still gave him a start every time it appeared without warning. "Farmer," Crest said, its translator smoothing the clipped, melodic alien speech into rough English. "You have questions?" "Yeah," Jonah said, leaning back in his chair. "Plenty of them. For starters, who exactly are these enemies you're talking about? And why did you pick my farm of all places to set up shop?" Crest's visor shifted slightly, a gesture Jonah had come to interpret as contemplation. "The entity you assisted, our scout, was gathering data on an encroaching faction. They are unlike us. a collective mind, seeking to assimilate all it encounters. The location of this farm holds strategic importance, a convergence point of certain natural resonances. Jonah frowned. Resonances, Crest hesitated, then gestured toward the horizon. The structures we have placed here amplify these resonances, creating a field that disrupts their approach. This site is not random. It is critical to our strategy. Jonah chewed over that for a moment. So I'm sitting on a galactic crossroads, or something, and now you're using my land as a shield against an alien invasion, essentially. Jonah sighed, rubbing his temples. Great, just great. Crest remained silent, its visor fixed on him. After a long pause, it said, Your actions set these events into motion. Without your intervention, the Scouts' data would have been lost, and this location would remain unknown. You have played a pivotal role. Jonah laughed bitterly. Pivotal. That's one way to put it. Another way is that I stuck my nose where it didn't belong, and now I've got an alien war on my doorstep. We did not choose you as a combatant, Crest said calmly. You are an ally. Jonah glanced down at the trinket on the railing. Its glow had grown faintly brighter in the twilight. He reached out and picked it up, turning it over in his hands. And what about this thing? What's it really for? Crest tilted its head slightly. It is a marker, a token of gratitude. It identifies you as a friend of our people. Should our enemies find you, it will ensure they know you are under our protection. Jonah raised an eyebrow. And if they don't care? They will care, Crest replied. And something about its tone made Jonah believe it. At least he hoped so. For a moment, they both stood quietly, the only sounds the faint hum of alien machinery and the rustling of the wind through the fields. Then Crest turned and began to walk away. It paused at the edge of the porch and said, The choice to assist us was yours. You were not obligated, but because of your choice, you have given us an advantage we would not have otherwise. Remember, of that. Jonah watched Crest disappear into the darkened yard. He looked down at the trinket again, feeling its faint warmth against his skin. Maybe the alien was right. Maybe his simple decision to help that wounded creature had made a difference. For better or worse, he was part of something much larger now. As the stars blinked into view overhead, Jonah sat back in his chair. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. His quiet life as a farmer was over. The world, no, the universe, had come to him, and somehow he'd stepped up.